Welcome to the MAM Journals. A while ago, Suzuki brought out a new midway engine and they introduced it in various bikes. There was the GSX 8S, which I have tested and really enjoyed. There's the adventure style bikes where they do an 800 DE, which is dual explorer, and they've done an RE, which is road explorer, and now they've launched this one, the GSX 8R. The middleweight sector is pretty busy. There's a huge selection of bikes that you can have within this sort of 650, 700 up to 900cc range in various terms of power, specification, and of course, pricing. I recently tried a BMW in this sort of space, the F900R, which I really enjoyed, although I didn't enjoy the weather. Today I want to be exploring the specifications of this bike. We'll then, as usual, go for a ride and I'll come back and make some sort of concluding comments and remarks. And one of the things I often do is I read press releases, which are, to be honest, across various manufacturers of varying quality. Some of them I think are written by people who beam in from the planet Smirnoff, but Suzuki's are pretty good actually. I quite like them and I like what they do. And one of the things they say, they do what they call a product concept, i.e. what they're trying to do with the bike, and I always think that's quite interesting to understand where they're coming from. They described the GSX 8R was created to combine practical, usable, real-world performance with rider-friendly controllability and ease of use. Well, let's find out if I agree. Right, so let's have a look around the bike. If you're a regular viewer, thank you for that. It's going to be the fourth time we've talked through this engine, but I think it's important just at least to put the basics in for somebody who's new to the channel or specifically looking at this bike. Funnily enough, the engine is still fitted with a 776cc parallel twin. It's a four-stroke, obviously, it's liquid cooled, and it's got double overhead cams, or dual, can't remember what Suzuki call them. It's like a number of bikes in the parallel twin market. It's got this 270-degree crank, and slightly more unusually, it's fitted with twin balancer shafts. It's a nice engine, it's been well received in the market. In terms of parallel twins, it's relatively mechanically quiet, and with the balancing shafts, relatively smooth. The bike produces 83 horsepower at 8,500 revs and 78 newton meters of torque at 6.5. It's fitted with a very good, and I'll touch on it later when we go for a ride, 6-speed quick shifter system. The bike's actually got quite a short wheelbase. It's 1465 millimeters, and at the front here it's got this 25-degree rake. It's also fitted with 17-inch wheels. In theory, that should be quite a sharp, easy bike to handle, but we'll find out more when we go for a ride. In terms of damping, it's fitted with these telescopics inverted in the usual way. Slight difference here is that if you remember on the 8S, this was silver anodized, which I quite like, and they've gone for the black on that one as part of the R model. And there's no adjustment on these front forks. They are Showa as opposed to the KYBs, which are fitted to the 8S. At the rear, in terms of damping, it's a link type in there, coil spring, oil damped, and it's got, the only adjustment you've got on that is preload, and this from the factory is set at 4, whilst actually on the 8S it's set at 3, which I noticed when reading through the handbook. The bike is fitted with Dunlop 120/70s at the front and 185/5s at the back. In terms of braking, here at the back, here it's fitted with obviously the single disc, which is a Nissan, as is indeed as the front, but they're twin discs, and as you can see by the mounting, it's radial. It's not radial at the top end, but they're they're fine. The brakes are fine. I don't mention it when we go out for a ride, so I'll cover it now. They're not what I would call razor sharp, but they're not soft either. So for me, they're sensible, easy to use brakes with plenty of stopping power. The bike is fitted with the same 14-litre tank as the 8S. The bike probably does about 60 miles per gallon. I suspect you can get it lower than that if you ride enthusiastically. So in theory, it's going to be, the range is about 180 to bone dry. So maybe 150 in the real world before you're looking for fuel. The big differences between the 8S, which I tested last year and really liked, and this 8R is this full fairing down here and snazzy headlamps, one on top of the other, which I think looks good, but we'll come back to aesthetics in a moment. It's got the upgrade to the suspension and a more sporty riding position by these lower, flatter bars. So looking at the front and going through a bit of the technology available, it's got this nice TFT screen. I talk again a bit more about that when we go for a ride, but it is nice and bright and easy to read. In terms of traction control and power modes, they're very easily controllable. Unlike some bikes, everything's done on this left-hand side as opposed to sort of switching them on over there and then adjusting them over here. So it is actually, once you get your head around it, nice and straightforward. You can see that I've got traction control off. So if I press the mode and get the light to go on, I can then cursor down, putting to 1, which is the least amount of traction control, or the time at which it comes in, how quickly it comes to your assistance. Second or third option. The third option being it will intervene the most rapidly in terms of any signs of spinning up. You then press mode again and you can go into power delivery modes, and this one is, you don't get any more power by changing modes. What you get is the point at which it delivers the power, i.e. how quickly it comes. A is the earliest it will deliver it, and again you cursor down going through the buttons and get B and C, which is mostly, I guess people would consider as rain mode. A reason I've gone through that in this detail here is I'm not going to be covering it when we go for a ride, but it is easy to do and you can do it on the go as long as you remember to close the throttle as you do it, get it to acknowledge the fact that you've changed the mode, open the throttle again and you're fully engaged. Nice little easy to operate system, and it works well. Right, so having come out of those modes, you have got, as you have on most modern bikes, you now have options to change screen settings and measurements. You simply press the button down and you get the menu up. So you've got information about ride, info on the bike and settings. I won't go through all of them because we'll probably get bored, but settings is a good example. So I've pressed that and now you can see that I can change the brightness of the screen. I can make it go white or dark. Or you can do it so that it's actually sensitive. We'll actually have a detailed look into units so that you can see there. Press the button, so speed, consumption. Again, you can see that I've set it for miles per gallon, imperial, but you can set it for whatever measurements you want because they use these bikes and these systems across the world, of course. So coming down there, just cursor down. Temperatures, again. Do you want Celsius or Fahrenheit? So usual sort of levels of control. If you spend half an hour with it, you'll very quickly get used to it. I think some people are a little bit intimidated by these buttons, but they really are very straightforward and easy to use. Right, so let's just quickly exit out of this overall menu. Easy enough to do, just put it down to close, and we're back to the starting point. What I'd like to do now is let's have a quick look at the aesthetics and the finish on the bike before we go for a ride. When we stand back and look at the bike and get a general feel for the aesthetics of it, it's quite a small bike, and with this 810mm seat, it's compact is probably a good way of describing it. I personally really like the aesthetics on these, but certainly be the first to accept each to their own. I think the bike looks purposeful, and I think it looks balanced. Well, even with this sort of slightly unusual construction out here, this is all to do with legislation in terms of how far the number plate and lights are from the rear axle or something like that. Somebody did explain it to me once, but I think they got halfway through and I lost the will to live. But that's to do with regulations. A lot of people actually go for a shorter, stubby look, which isn't to my eye, and they end up putting things from R&G, I think, do them. Evo Tech do them, where you can just move that all backwards, if that's what you personally like. I personally like the colour combinations here. I think the way that the grey and the black, the silvers, I think it combines really nicely. I think it's stylish when compared to other bikes in the category. This full fairing, I think, really suits the bike, and you get better aerodynamics, and you do get some wind and weather protection on it. Keeping it clean, you've got to be a bit careful with it. If you're the sort of person who likes to ride in all conditions and goes out in assault, you want to be careful that you actually get it properly washed out underneath, because full fairings can hide a multitude of sins. And personally, because I do like to keep my bikes nicely together, what I do if I ride a bike with a full fairing on, I learn how to take the fairings off so that I can actually really get under there. And it's always a faff in the first place and you wonder why you bothered, but once you get the hang of it, it comes off relatively easy. The bike was easy to clean. I think it's, as I say, nicely finished. The engine finishes on Suzuki are nice. They're easy to clean. I've done a few hundred miles on this, and it cleaned up really nicely. The paint is always a little bit tricky on some of these Suzukis. The black in particular is quite soft, so if you don't like sort of micro scratches on it, then be careful how you clean it, because it will mark easily. But for me, it's a nice looking bike. You'll make your own mind as to whether it is attractive to your eye or not. Anyway, let's go for a ride. Having ridden all of the Suzukis fitted with this engine and gearbox, I felt at home immediately. The riding position is spacious. The bars are lower than the more upright S, and you are leaning forward rather than crouched on the bike as you would with a more traditional sports bike. The low foot pegs also mean that you have plenty of room for your legs and you don't feel tucked. The bike is actually quite small overall, so these comments are made for those of average height or shorter rather than the taller amongst us. Larger riders might like to try one for size before progressing their interest. My first impression is just how smooth and easy this Suzuki quickshifter is. The latest evolutions of this system are frankly a revelation. I've said it before and will say it again. This generation of quickshifter are the best I have ever ridden on any bike. Amazingly, you can turn it off, but quite why anyone would want to do so remains a mystery to me. It is effortless, smooth, and so well integrated with the engine. The bike feels light but not slight, if that makes sense. At 205 kilograms, it's got enough about it to feel planted, which is always useful in winds. You are, as I say, leaning forward on the bike, but the steering is not heavy and the bike feels balanced and neutral. As we said in the technical review, this 8R version is fitted with upgraded Showa suspension rather than the KYB system fitted to the 8S, and you can feel the difference. Combined with a small but full fairing, the 8R definitely has a sportier poise to it. I was interested to read that it, or one like it, will be competing in a new race series called the Pirelli Sports Bike National Championship, alongside bikes like the Yamaha R7, the Aprilia 660, the Kawasaki Ninja 650 and the Honda Hornet, the 750 version. They will be running on shared ECU platforms to manage parity of power and slick tyres. I think that will be a good series to watch, and I'm interested to see who wins. There are certainly plenty of good bikes to choose from in the midweight twin and triple sector. After a gentle run into Byberry, it was good to try the bike at slower town speeds. It is light, precise, and the low revs assist system, I'm not quite sure that's what they call it, but that's what it does, makes it easy to pull away and potter, which is exactly what I did, alongside the back lanes to the classic hub at nearby Ablington. These were actually the wettest roads I found all day, and as usual they were mud and gravel strewn, so a good chance to test its low speed balance and throttle control. It is a really easy bike to ride. If you watch regularly, you will know that I have a bump test road, which most roadsters with their firmer and less travel suspension don't normally like much. I decided to spare the R any blushes. The road has been so badly damaged by this winter's relentless wet weather and poor maintenance, it is now no longer a bump test, but more of a death trap, probably better for off-roaders. Coffee beckoned, and the hub is a great place to stop for one if you're in the area. They always make you feel welcome. Back on the open road, I head to Stratford-on-Avon, or actually the Piston Club, just outside, enjoying the mostly dry roads along the way. Making steady progress, I did notice and reflect on the clear and bright TFT. I mentioned in another video, I think it was the Road Explorer version, that the display is very easy to read, but it's actually quite small. It is a 5.5-inch screen, but the actual bit that you look at is more like 3.5. Having ridden the BMW F900R recently, it is fitted with their customary 6.5 screen, and I have to say, it is better. Suzuki have definitely cracked the gearbox issue, but BMW screens do take some beating. Still, I think the Suzuki screen is much better than previous models, and progress is progress. Riding at these sort of speeds with the occasional overtake, the bike feels poised. It's ready to press on when you ask, but stable and comfortable as you go. You can get panniers and a tank bag for the bike and the larger Taurus screen, but personally, if touring was a big part of your biking requirements, other models, like the Road Explorer version, might be better. I would definitely fit heated grips, but I will take some convincing that I would need to spend over £400, which is what Suzuki ones are. Other brands are available, as they say. The optional USB socket might be useful though. For me, the real versatility of this bike is its ability to ride in a dynamic and engaging way whilst coping so well with the realities of modern motorcycling. All nice roads eventually lead you to towns, 20 and 30 mile/hour speed limits and traffic. Whatever power mode you're in, the quick shifter works smoothly, up and down, and I was virtually only using the clutch for final moves into and out of first. I had easy foot contact either side, and the weight of the bike is in the middle as opposed to high in the frame. If the weather is nice and you feel like commuting to work on it, it'll be fun. How much power you want is normally about personal preference, although governments occasionally get involved in this area. The plethora of 200 plus horsepower bikes available at the moment suggests their attention is currently elsewhere, so the choice, once you've passed your test if you need to, or got an insurance quote, is ours. At 83 horsepower, this bike is at the lower end of what is available. It is a brisk bike rather than an outright fast one, certainly by modern standards. The bike, like so many Suzukis, is doing about 73 miles an hour, just under 120 kph if you think in those units, at 5,000 revs in sixth. My back of the envelope calculations suggest that you'll be doing about 95 miles an hour at 6,500 revs, which is peak torque, and over 120 miles an hour at 8,500 revs, which is peak power. That leaves you 2,000 revs left before you hit the red line. I think these bikes have been road tested at over 130 miles an hour. Some argue, and I respect their logic, that top speed is largely academic, and what matters is acceleration. Certainly some of the more powerful bikes in the category, like the Yamaha and KTM, both with about 120 horsepower, get there quicker, and they aren't wrong. They do. For me, This is a nicely balanced bike, capable of making very good progress. It's easy and engaging and dynamic to ride. Predictable handling and a gearbox as smooth as butter. It may not be everyone's choice, but I would be surprised if even those that opt for something else don't get off it, look back and say, that is a nice bike. Sometimes less is more. Well, I hope that you can tell I certainly had fun. It's just great to be out on some nearly dry roads. So, as I said that at the beginning, I'd sort of come back and review this practicality issue, this practical, usable, real-world performance with rider-friendly controllability and ease of use. Well done, Suzuki. I think you've absolutely nailed it. Of course, sadly, building a good bike doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to sell in huge volumes. And one of the questions I've got with this bike is, well, who's actually going to buy it? Now, the thing that keeps most motorcycle manufacturers awake at night is the fact that most of their customers are people more like me than young people coming in to motorcycling. If you like, it's an upside down triangle. There's a lot more at the top than there is at the bottom. Now, if you're at the bottom of that triangle, making your way through your motorcycling world, then I think bikes like this, as a first middleweight bike, sensible performance, easy to ride, and that first step through, this is a fantastic bike from my perspective. I certainly remember the first bikes that I rode when I began my journey, and this would knock all of them into a cocked hat. It is a fantastic bike. It's the sort of bike that you'll be talking about in 30 years' time to your children and waxing lyrical about it, and of course they'll be telling you, well, it has got nowhere near enough kilowatts and doesn't even hover. But you'll face that journey when you get there, as we all have now. But the challenge I think the bike will have is that for many people who are buying middleweight bikes, they're not on the way up, they're on the way down. They've already been there and done that. They've had all the silly bikes. I've got a foot in both camps. I mostly ride sensible bikes and occasionally crazy bikes. But the journey tends to be, once you've had the crazy bikes, you then settle down a bit and you begin to ride more sensible, usable bikes. Now, the challenge with this bike is, where do you want to be? In all the choices available, you've got bikes really that go from about 120 brake horsepower down to sort of 65, 70-ish. This is quite near the bottom in terms of 83 brake horsepower. And some people on their journey down might be saying, well, I want to go for the 120 of the KTM or the MT-09, or I want to go for the 105 of the BMW, and may not feel that this is enough. But I guess that's depending on where you see yourself and how much fun you can have out of riding bikes like this, which are quite sporty, quite brisk, and enjoying riding them smoothly and easily. For me, it works. I guess we'll all be deciding how much money we want to spend, well indeed we've got, and how much power and performance we're looking for. If I had £9,000 as my budget limit, I would be buying this one. But if you have more, you pays your money and you takes your choice. I do hope that you've enjoyed this video, and I appreciate you watching. If you have enjoyed it, perhaps you'd be kind enough to press like or even consider subscribing to the channel. But as always, what is most important is you ride safe and you stay well.